Welcome, everyone, to Womanocity for Women with Curiosity on Woman Radio. We are so happy to invite a delightful guest from Canada who is so amazing. Of course, all my guests are. Let me introduce you to Rosa John. She is the artistic director of the Kehewin Native Dance Theatre in the Kehewin Cree Nation of Alberta, Canada. The Kehewin Native Dance Theatre, and it has been touring for 30 years all over the world, from Canada to New Zealand to Hawaii to Poland and places beyond. So what a wonderful time we're going to have today. You're going to learn so much that I'm sure you did not know before. So for you curious ladies, let's bring Rosa John into the studio. Welcome, Rosa. It's so good to have you with me today.
Thank you very much, Tadia. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. From Hawaii to Canada to South Africa to points beyond, we come together because that's what women do. Let me just tell my audience a little bit about you. You do traditional storytelling and dance from the Cree and Taino nations. The performances are really about social issues. So your art is extremely relevant to the world and to the audiences. You have done performances about water, about missing and murdered women, and we're going to talk more about that, about the effects of residential schools. And folks, if you don't know what that is, we're going to cover that too. You also do performances about the history of colonization on the Western Canadian prairies. So my friends in South Africa will definitely be able to relate to colonialization issues. Matter of fact, everyone on the continent will be able to relate. Sometimes people don't understand that colonialization occurred everywhere on the planet, and it had such horrific impact on people of color. Let's talk about Indigenous youth, suicide, residential school legacy, the survivors like your husband, Melvin John, and missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. So much to talk about, so much important information. So Rosa, let me ask you, what prompted you to start the most celebrated Native dance theater in Canada, Kehewin Native Dance Theatre?
Well, my husband and I had always done dancing, contemporary dance, since we met in 1981. And then we started having our family, and we were still doing theater. We had a company called Four Winds Theater with two other people, and we were still doing theater. But then in 1991, I got pregnant, and my husband decided after 8 years of not having any more babies, I got pregnant. And my husband said, I'd like to go back to school. I'd like to get my BA. And I said, yes, let's do this. Let's stop touring. Let's go and do that. So we moved to Ontario with our 3 kids and with me 9 months pregnant. It was a great move because I had been there before. I had lived there for a few years when I got my BA from Trent University. He went into Trent University into the Native Studies department. We thought everything was great. I already had my baby. She was born September 28th, 1991. And now it was around April or May 1992. I was getting ready. The kids were going to be coming home on the bus. My daughter Violet came in and her face was all red. Her braids had been pulled out and it was all raggy on one side. And her doll that she was carrying didn't have a head on it. And she kind of ran to her room.
She came home from school like this?
So she was 8 years old. So then my son came in and his braids were both out and all like hair was all kind of crazy. You could tell he was on the verge of tears and he came running through and I was like, what's going on? What's going on? Hey, come here, come here. Then my oldest daughter came in and she came in and she kind of threw her backpack down very angrily. And I said, Monique, what's going on? All of a sudden, Jody and Violet just started crying. And Monique said, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. She was a teenager. She was in grade 8. She was graduating that year from elementary. She said that every day after school, since they had begun school, that they were harassed by these two kids, these two boys, and that they often made fun of the kids' hair, their braids, and that they said that they were stuck up. They didn't know anything about making friends. So of course, being me, I thought, oh, I'll connect with their mother and I'll talk with their mother and we'll figure this out. So I made the mistake of calling their mother. You're not supposed to do that ever. You call the principal. I called the mother. I thought we would speak. She hung up and I started making supper, and all of a sudden we heard a vehicle in the driveway. And I was like, oh, who's that? I look out the door and it was the mom and her husband and the two boys. And she just started yelling all these crazy things at the house.
Oh my.
My husband was home by then. Yeah, it was really scary. So we had a family meeting that night. And we said that we would go to the school the next day and talk with the principal. So we did that. And what we devised to do, we would come in, because one of the issues was that my kids were never on the baseball team in the summer because we were always at powwows. My family's a powwow family. And so we used to come out west and go powwowing all summer. When you powwow, it's like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, go home Monday, do laundry, and get back on the road, and keep going. And so they didn't have time for baseball or anything like that. And they loved dancing. They loved being in the powwow trail. We went in and we started talking to them about what it was like to be both First Nations and Indigenous from another country. Because I told them about me, I'm Taino, and my people are also colonized people, but by the Spanish, not the British and the French, like in Canada.
Where are the Taino?
The Taino are in the Caribbean, and I am from Cuba. And it was the Spanish that colonized us. They were very, very brutal. And so what happened was we started. We started to talk to the kids. They let us have all the kids from the school. And we started telling them traditional stories. We started telling them what we do and who we are and what my kids are into. And then we said, would you like to see them dance like they do at powwows? And the kids just went, yeah. And so they danced. From then on, they were like superheroes at the school. They had all these buddies. We started going to the school and talking to them about what being Indigenous was, why their hair was long, why my kids wore braids. And we were doing these little mini workshops for like an hour every month. And then we showed them how to do their own powwow. So we brought the powwow to the school, and several of the kids at the school were Native, but they didn't want to tell anybody because they could pass as non-Native. So it was really wonderful because they came out and said, I'm from the reserve right next door, and that's where I'm from, and I'm Ojibwe. And it was like, wow, there's Ojibwe kids, Anishinaabe kids in this class. So it was really beautiful. But what happened then was other schools started finding out about what we were doing. They wanted to have us come to their school and do some of this Native awareness, I guess you would call it. And so we started doing that with just the schools in the area. After that, it just spread like wildfire. And we ended up starting a company and doing this as a living.
Wow, the birth of the Kehewin Native Dance Theater, who has now gone all over the world. You've extended far beyond the children's school. The history of Kehewin Dance Theater. It's very interesting that out of your desire to have your children understood you really now have allowed the world to understand the reality of what being Canadian and American Native Indigenous First Nations people is about. And the fact that you are Caribbean Native is really remarkable. The Taino are amazing people. You'll find them everywhere from Cuba to Jamaica to Bermuda to everywhere, Aruba, you name it, all throughout the Caribbean. So
Canada,
and,
Canada too.
and Canada. So in essence, you are what many people might consider a mixed marriage of Cree and Taino. So let's talk about that when we come back. There's just so much more to learn from Rosa John and my goodness, and what she and her husband, Melvin, have created and achieved. We'll be right back, folks. Do not go anywhere from Womanocity for women with curiosity like you and me and Rosa John, my very special guest, here on Woman Radio.
Mosha Vi'i. My name is Keri Shitendero from Namibia, and you are listening to Womana Radio for well-organized men. I'm listening to.
My name is Linda Beal. I live in California. When I want thought-provoking programs to listen to, I pull up Woman Radio. I especially appreciate the fascinating women who are interviewed on Womanocity. Woman Radio is a lively and lovely way to spend my time.
No man is an island. Ladies, let's open up and discuss issues, whether good or bad. Platforms are there. Woman Radio happens to be just one of them. I'm inviting you on the couch to further discuss areas of concern every Thursday from 10 a.m. South African time to 12 noon. On the couch with me, Yvonne Chaka Chaka, here on Woman Radio, well-organized men, for we are.
Meet me at the party on the couch.
Welcome back, friends. We're with Rosa John in Alberta, Canada, who is the artistic director of the Kehewin Native Dance Theatre with her husband, Melvin. And we have so much more to talk about. It's imperative that we reach to youth when they are still open before the world has beat them up to where they no longer want to learn things. How do you reach youth in your communities and all over the world where you have gone? What is your message to them?
Well, one of the things that we do, well, first, we were in the school for 4 years here on the reserve, and we started a program called Native Cultural Fine Arts. The kids enjoyed it so much, and they started to grow so much that they didn't want to leave. We ended up developing a thing called the coffee house, and we would have a coffee house twice a month, and it would cost $2 to get in. You could dance, you could do poetry, you could sing, you could just dance to whatever was on, and the kids flocked to it. Sometimes the kids would pay so they could have their juice and their snack, and they would be outside because we didn't have enough room to host everyone. So it was really, really exciting, really, really good. We also had 4 every year. We hosted the Native Cultural Fine Arts program, hosted what was called Indigenous Youth Festival. And we had Indigenous youth from all over come here to our little tiny reserve and do theater, do dance. It was incredible. We had Aztec dancers, we had Maori dancers. Of course, they were people who we had met on our travels. They came here, and it was so wonderful to have them come and meet our youth and have our youth see that there was Indigenous people everywhere. Now, one of the things that grew out of that Native Cultural Fine Arts program was that after we stopped teaching in the school, the kids still wanted to do this. They wanted to have their say, and they wanted the freedom to be able to say it just the way they wanted. We allowed that because they were able to come in and do music in the music studio. And in the music studio, that's where they do their music production. And so it's really their say, their words, their actions. So what happened is we started having a training program, 6 to 8 week training program every summer. And we would only accept 7 youth because we're a small studio. And we said, what would you like to talk about? If you could tell the world what you wanted to say, what is it you would want to talk about? Mm-hmm. So the first show was about water, because our water here, we have to boil it. So it became a big issue because it's been like that for some of these kids' whole lives.
Rosa, is the water issue just on the reservations or the reserves?
Yes. Here in Kehewin, it's been about 40 years, since you can't use any of the wells. Some of these parents now, they've never even gotten to see water come out of the faucet that they could drink. You can wash with it, you can bath with it, but you can't drink it, ingest it. They wanted to do this show about water, and we did. And it was an incredible show. We used all sorts of dance. We used contemporary dance, powwow dance, hoop dance. We started touring that around the schools. First, we did it in our community, then we did it in the neighboring community. We were performing this show, and then the next summer we did another show. And the next summer we did another show. The second show was about Treaty 6 and why the treaty was signed. And of course, that's when we started talking about residential school. The people depended hugely on the buffalo, on the bison. And so what happened is when they were coming out west, because the government was telling people, move west, a lot of room, everybody can have room. Well, what happened is they would build those railroads right on the trails of where these buffaloes would go, and the people would hunt. The people depended on the buffalo for everything, their homes, their food, their clothing, tools, weapons. So
you're talking about the Cree Nation?
There's also the Dakota Sioux that live in Saskatchewan, Manitoba. There's the Cree, there's the Blackfoot, there's the Dene. All of these nations were affected. And the thing is when the buffalo would cross over the railroad tracks, they would damage them. So the railroad people hired sharpshooters, and the sharpshooters would lay flat on top of the train, and they would shoot down all of the buffalo. They would just make piles of dead buffalo that would just rot on the prairies. They would just, these huge mounds of hundreds of buffalo. With each buffalo head that somebody brought in, you would get money. During that time, all these buffaloes are being killed, and the people started to starve. So the government got involved and said, well, if you're so hungry, we will give you food. We will give you lard, flour, sugar, and coffee. We will let you have that if you stay on reserves, if you sign a treaty and you stay in these little concentrated places. Well, all of these prairie cultures were constantly mobile. The teepee is a lodge that can be put up, taken down, and moved very quickly because the people had to move. They were in constant motion behind the buffalo. Because of this, the people used a lot of room, miles and miles and miles of prairie. But now they were going to be concentrated into a small, tiny area. Starvation, of course, set in. A lot of Indian agents were not honest. They would keep the good food that they were bringing in. They would keep it for themselves. They would not share it with the people. The people started to die, and the chiefs decided to sign the treaties.
What did Treaty 6 actually do or say?
Some of the important parts of it are the health, that promise of health being covered. Also the promise of education being covered, the promise of this land that they were on, which of course then got made even smaller. So there were lots of things in the treaty, lots that are still today and lots that disappeared. Lots of the treaties were broken. Once they got Native people onto the reserves, they used something that had worked really good in Europe. It had worked really good in New Zealand and Australia. It had worked in Africa. It had worked in the States. It had worked all over. And they were called residential schools. They would take the children from their families, leave communities childless. They would put those children in schools that weren't really to learn reading and writing. They were schools to make you productive, almost to a slave-like indenture. They were schools where you would learn to clean, schools where you would learn to farm, where you would learn to fix a house, all of these kind of things. But in those schools, what happened is there was a lot of trauma. Besides the trauma of being taken from your family, there was also the trauma that happened at the school. When you went into the school, your hair was cut short, in fact, shaved. Many kids came in with their beautiful braids, were cut off. Most of the kids would come in with really nice clothes because their parents thought they were sending them to a special place, to school. They would go there with their best clothes. Those clothes would be taken off, sometimes burned. The kids would have a powder put on them to secure that they didn't have lice. And then they would wash that off in groups of children naked, groups of children that were very, very private. They came from very private communities that respected their bodies. They were not used to washing in groups of people that they didn't even know, perfect strangers. So it was very, very sad.
You know, residential schools only now are becoming known. It's been such a hidden fact in the US and Canada for 150 years. That is how long the US and Canada ran these schools for Native children. Hundreds of thousands of children were housed and supposedly educated in these institutions to civilize the savage. That was actually the term that was used, to civilize the savage. By 1920s, nearly 83% of Native American school-age children were attending these schools. And in the 1950s, thousands of these Native American children, and Canadian too, died. Just recently, 1,300 unmarked grave sites at 4 former residential schools in Western Canada, where you are, have been found. These graves have been found, and it shocked and horrified Canadians who knew nothing about this. Same thing with the US. Most people don't know about these things. Indigenous peoples, both in Canada and America, have been haunted by the legacy of these Indian residential school system. The revelations are so painful and so traumatic, it hits close to home because I know people who went to those residential schools. I lived next door to the Phoenix Indian School in Arizona. I had friends who were there who would eventually come and attend my high school. Oh my goodness, the damage that is done. And for you, you are married to a man who has been victimized by these schools.
Yes. Yes. He was taken from his family and put into the residential school. And then after 4 years of that, he was taken again. And a lot of people think that this is all ancient history. It's not. The last school closed in 1996. This is not ancient history. This is a history that many of us are alive for. Many, even my children, are alive to know where these residential schools were. More important, the damage that it did historically, because it didn't just damage those children that were in the school. It damaged several generations after. It's an intergenerational damage that it's done. And that, I believe, is the worst thing about what happened, is the intergenerational trauma that it's caused. It wasn't just the trauma of those children that attended, but also the trauma of their children, their children's children, and their children's children's children. And all of these generations are traumatized because of what happened. That's really intense look at who Indigenous people are, why they look at the world the way they do, and the things that have happened.
Thank you for that, because this legacy of the survivors of residential schools, the impact is still so horrifyingly influencing Indigenous youth on reservations and off reservations, the high rate of suicide, and the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. These two issues, we're going to talk about that as soon as we come back, because they are really important to understand suicide among these Indigenous youth and what is happening to Indigenous women and girls in Canada and the United States. Don't go away, folks. You're really going to want to hear what's going on with this. We'll be right back on Womanocity for Women with Curiosity on Woman Radio, broadcasting globally 24/7.
Hi, I'm Disero Mamabulo from Light of Africa, South Africa in Pretoria. I listen to Women Radio when I want to learn new things or hear new music. The shows are always stimulating from On the Couch to Womanocity. There is always something interesting or inspirational. I'm glad you are listening too.
Womanocity is like a good cup of coffee with a new friend, somebody I'd never have a chance to meet. Sometimes it's a new idea or thinking about an old one in a new way. It's girlfriends, it's Tadia, and it's all good. This is American artist, writer, and girlfriend Jenny Cooley in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Hi, Ramalekana, Light of Africa, South Africa here in Pretoria. Thanks, Voni, for bringing Women Radio to life so that we listeners will have mental nourishment whenever we want it. There's no subject off the table. The Women Radio gives us the freedom to express our hope, dreams, fear, and determination to make a better world for our children.
Hello from Los Angeles. I'm Kehewin Manson, and I'm 7 years old. I listen to Woman Radio with my mommy, and I hope you do too.
Oh my goodness, welcome back, friends. It's so good to have you with me, and I'm so glad you join me every Saturday night at 9 p.m. South Africa time and in other time zones across the world. We're talking with Rosa John, who established the Kehewin Native Dance Theater, who has traveled all over the world, Switzerland, New Zealand, Germany, Italy, France, Mexico, Ecuador, and across the U.S., Australia, Canada, you name it, they've been there. And what they are teaching people is critically important information that we're going to talk about now. And that is the high rate of suicide among Native youth in both the US and Canada, and what's happening to women on and off the reservation. Rosa, welcome back. I'm so happy to have you with me. And I know that the friends want to hear about generational impact because it actually affects many countries, not just the US and Canada, but Indigenous peoples all over the world, including sub-Saharan Africa that was colonized, the rest of the continent that was colonized, but especially where apartheid reigned its ugly head in South Africa and Namibia. Tell us a little bit about why the youth of Canada and America, who are Native, who come from all kinds of tribal groups, are committing suicide. What do they tell you?
When I'm talking about intergenerational trauma, I'm talking not just about a pain of hate or a pain of fear. It's a pain that covers their whole being. When people went to the residential schools, the amount of trauma that happened there, the mental trauma, the physical trauma, the emotional trauma, and for some, even sexual abuse. Those traumas make you kind of want to shut down. You don't want to share anymore. You're done with that. And so what happens is we have people coming back to the communities who are shut down. A lot of them don't remember their language anymore because, of course, in the school, you weren't allowed to speak your language. You had to learn English. And of course, these kids were coming in speaking their language. They didn't know English, and so they were beaten for speaking their language. When they would come back to the reserve after 4 to 8 to 12 years in the schools, they didn't know the language. They couldn't communicate with the elders. They couldn't communicate even sometimes with their own family. They would try to go into the towns and city, but the enormous prejudice that happened in those places again shut them down. So they're dealing with not being able to go home, not being able to live in the city or communities outside of the reserve. They're fighting between all of these worlds. They don't know what to do. Many of these young people started to take their own lives. They couldn't handle the trauma of not being able to communicate with their communities anymore. They couldn't handle the trauma of not being accepted in the city. And so they started committing suicide. In 1986, in a community called Musqueam in Alberta, our friends were going through a lot of hardship because in their community, it was the highest suicide rate in all of Canada. And it was a little reserve. And they were like, how can this be the place that has the highest suicide rate? Well, if you look at communities in Canada, many of the highest suicide rates in Canada are from Native or Inuit or Métis. Those are the communities with the highest suicide rate. It's really something that became a huge problem. Still is. Our friends called us and they said, we need to do something here in Musqueam. And they said, our kids are dying here. We need to do something. They said, can you come and let's try and put something together? And so we did. We went and we put together a show called It's My Life. It was a show about suicide. At that time, when we did that show, Melvin's oldest brother had committed suicide just a few years before. It really touched us, the things that we were talking about, life, death, those decisions, everything that was creating this place where they had nowhere else to go but to take their own life. And that is a very, very dark place to be. We went and we talked about this and we started touring this show and we started talking to them about places to call and talk. The Counseling Unit Center in Edmonton started being able to track our tour as we went around because kids were calling from these communities. They said, well, why did you call? Well, because we saw this group that came and they did a show. And so it worked. It worked. We touched hearts, we touched minds. And that's what this work does. The kids that we work with, although some have been high risk, some are not. We work together with kids that have their families and kids that don't have their families. And we work together and they create shows about exactly what they've been through or what their friends have been through. The shows are very, very intimate and very, very real to the kids that are performing them. This is something that's really important. When kids get to tell their own stories, they have a place to voice it. And that's really what they need. They need to be able to voice these feelings so that they're not taking their own life.
And the feelings of hopelessness and not fitting in, lack of acceptance. I mean, the racism, the prejudice against Native peoples is still very high in the US and Canada. I remember growing up, my family looks Native, and we would get called all kinds of names, dirty Indian. I mean, even through college, we would have cowboys throwing stones at the window of the car with a group of diverse friends. But because we were in an area that was Prescott, Arizona, of all things, we definitely were attacked. And I can only imagine that what little I experienced of being misidentified, how bad it can be on kids who are wearing their braids, are brown skinned, clearly not part of the mainstream of America, what they experience. It's the same thing as young African American, African Canadian kids who want to wear hoodies or drop their jeans. These stereotypical images are laden with historical racism. And this brings me to the subject of missing and murdered Indigenous women. It is so devastating that on reservations, Indigenous women are murdered at a rate of 10 times the national average of other ethnicities. That's in the US. That's a statistic from the Department of Justice. Murder is the third leading cause of death among Native women, and more than 4 out of 5 Indigenous women have experienced violence. But the perpetrators on reservations are really never held accountable. And I do know this story firsthand because one of my play daughters lost 2 sisters to their boyfriends killing them, and nothing was done. It's a very sad and very systemic reality that we face. And these were Lakota. It's rampant on Pine Ridge. And those of us who are familiar with this issue feel so helpless because what can we do? It's very tragic and very sad. How do you tell that story to change the attitudes of others?
In Canada, what happens is a lot of these disappearances are happening in communities that are near what's called man camps. Man camps are camps where the men that work on rigs or that work in mines or things like that, like the gold mine or the diamond mines or the oil rigs, they work there and they make a lot of money. Well, there's no place to spend that money. The towns are very, very far and in between. A lot of Native women go missing near these man camps. The police do not investigate properly. RCMP are not doing anything about it. So these women are going missing and nobody is doing anything about it. We did a show called Love Our Women. It was with 7 young girls, and they're the ones that wanted to talk about this subject because women were going missing. And then women were being found in shallow graves or dismembered. I mean, it was really sick, the things that were happening to the women and still are. The kids that we work with wanted to tell the story. So we did. And it was really moving for many of the communities. It touches everywhere. Any Native community that you go to and you talk about missing and murdered women, somebody knows somebody or somebody knows the family of. It has touched everyone. After our shows, we always have a Q&A period where the schools or communities can talk to the kids. Some of the elders, their eyes would be moist from crying throughout the show. They said, it was so wonderful that you brought tears and laughter. Because in the show, we always weave humor, but you can find humor in anything. One of the things that we're really good at, and this is right across the board, North, South America, everywhere. Native people know how to make people laugh.
Yes.
And we laugh hard and laugh.
It's wonderful. I've been privileged to go to some comedy shows with female comics, and it's hilarious. It's hilarious. I have a quick question for you. The music in your shows is outstanding. It's wonderful. Who composes for you? I would really like to play it, at least get a taste of it for the appreciation of the audience.
We use all original music. The composer is Russell Wallace, and he and I work together with my husband, Melvin, and we create all the music, and some of them is created just by Russell, but we try and work together to create the music for all the shows. Russell and I have been working together since 1986.
I'm Tadia Rice, and you're listening to Womanocity for Women with Curiosity. I'm so happy you can be with me today. Please stay tuned. We have more to come on Woman Radio.
Ich bin Leila Tavanaro Hedarian aus Wien und höre Woman Radio. Ich lerne so viel Interessantes von den Radiomoderatorinnen und liebe die Musik. Ich freue mich, dass ihr auch Woman Radio hört.
When I want thought-provoking programs to listen to, I pull up Woman Radio. I especially appreciate the fascinating women who are interviewed on Womanocity, and Tadia gives one food for thought. My name is Kwezi Fudu Tsanenda, and I live in Johannesburg. And woman radio is a lively and lovely way to spend my time.
Womanocity is like a good cup of coffee with a new friend, somebody I'd never have a chance to meet. Sometimes it's a new idea or thinking about an old one in a new way. It's girlfriends, it's Tadia, and it's all good. This is American artist, writer, and girlfriend Jenny Cooley in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Rosa John, you are so amazing. You and Melvin have brought to the world such important information and delivered in an entertaining and an educational way. Let me ask you, what's the best advice you've ever been given?
By my dad, I think, who said, nothing that you do is ever going to be small. Even though you think that something you do is very, very small and very, very meaningless, it's usually huge and it affects a lot of things around you. So nothing you do is small. Everything you do, it affects all sorts of things around you, not just you, but everything in your environment. So make sure that what you do is going to leave it a positive vibration in that movement around you.
Isn't that fascinating? Wow. If every child was taught that they have influence and impact, wouldn't that make a difference in them and our world? Wow, your dad was a very wise man. Now, what would you tell your younger self about, life, love, purpose? I think you already found.
I would say you don't need someone to tell you that you're wonderful, tell you that you're good. You don't need that. I know that it's fun to have that around, but we don't need somebody telling us how beautiful we are or how wonderful we are. What we need is to feel inside ourselves that we're beautiful and wonderful. And once we find that place, you'll find who you are. Don't depend on other people telling you and supporting you by telling you you're smart, you're wonderful, you're this, you're that. You don't need it.
Then how do you know it? Who tells you that?
I think it's just important to have that understanding in yourself, to know that you're going to be okay. When we're teenagers, we think everything is the world. Everything seems so huge and important and devastating. When we get hurt as youth, it's devastating. But know that it's not the end of the world. There's a lot of life ahead of you, and know that you're an incredible person. Know it inside, feel it inside yourself. Don't depend on anybody trying to tell you.
Oh, what would you say to yourself about love, your younger self? What would you tell your younger self about love and romance?
Love is really trust. Trust and love is one thing together. And we just call it love, but it's really trust. Because that human being that you're so in love with, it's really that human being that you trust with your whole life, with your past, with your present, your future. And they're the one that you're going to want to share everything with. So you need to be able to trust. And so for me, love is trust.
Excellent advice. I usually ask everybody, what is your biggest achievement to date? I kind of have a feeling I know what your biggest achievement is, but I suspect there's something else there.
My biggest achievement is that I have 4 amazing children. I have 15 incredible grandchildren, and that they all want to hang out with me. That's the most amazing achievement I think I've ever had, is that these people love me so much. They want to be with me. It's so crazy. They come all the way to the reserve, and they all meet here in July just to be with me. And I'm moved by that every year. It's so powerful to have that happen to me. So yes, I think that's the most amazing thing I've ever done, is be the mother and grandmother to these kids.
I can understand that. I want to be with you. I've had the I've had the privilege of being with your daughter on several occasions, Violet Duncan, who was actually my very first guest on Womanocity. And she is so remarkable. But I see why she is so remarkable, because you are so remarkable. And what you've just shared with my guests as good advice is obviously what you taught her as she was growing up. And she has become such a marvelous and influential author, performer, mother herself. I know your grandbabies. I love those kids. I have been able to participate in Apache ceremony with them in Arizona, and I can't tell you how meaningful that the Duncan Ohana, with whom she married into, how meaningful that clan has been in my life for the past 40 or 50 years. I don't even know how long it's been. They're family. So I get it, girl. I want to hang out with you. I'll come up there. I'll come up to Alberta. I want to see a performance and I want to hang out.
Well, you're welcome to come up to the res anytime. We've got our big teepee up. We can fit like 20 people in there. So come on over, come to Alberta, come to Kehewin, and come to our home. Visit our studio, visit our teepee, visit our home.
Wonderful, wonderful. And if there's a powwow going on, you know I'm going to be there.
There's always a powwow somewhere during the summer.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we can find a powwow.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, now we're going to have some fun with my speed round of 25 questions in 2 minutes. I do this with everybody, Rosa. I want you to answer as best as you can. I'll give you 2 passes, but no more. Do you think you can handle my speed round of 25 questions in 2 minutes?
Hit me with it. Hit me with it.
Okay, you're ready?
Yep.
Okay. All right. First question. The clock is ticking. What color or flavor is your favorite M&M?
Chocolate. Brown.
Okay, brown. Are you a cat person or a dog person?
Neither.
Oh, what animal are you a person of?
I like lizards.
That's the most unusual answer I've gotten so far. Would you rather eat chocolate or watch your TV show?
Chocolate.
What's one city you've always dreamed of traveling to?
I can't remember the name. It's that city with all the bridges. Not, what is it called?
How about a
I
country?
can't remember.
Country? Do you know what country it's in?
Belgium? Is it in Belgium?
Oh, it could be.
You know, it's that place that has all the bridges. I can't remember.
I don't know what it would be. You can pass if you want.
Okay, pass.
Okay. Are you a morning or night person?
Morning.
What words do you live by?
Let's see. Well, I live by work hard, play hard.
That's good. I like that. What's one vice you wish you could give up?
A vice. Well, I eat a lot of chocolate, and during COVID, I gained 30 pounds.
Oh,
So I wish, So I wish I could cut down on the chocolate just till all this COVID's gone.
oh gosh. All right. What's the best compliment you've ever received?
Are these your children? Oh my goodness. They're so beautiful, brilliant, and well behaved.
Ooh, that is
I
so
thought,
nice.
wow, I couldn't believe it.
Well, it's true. I would say that too. Boy, your kids are impressive, girl, and your grandkids are impressive too. So, how do you start your
Thank
day?
you.
You are welcome. So, how do you start your day, Rosa?
I leap out of bed. Everybody teases me because I literally leap out of bed. 5:30 in the morning. I don't have an alarm clock or anything, just something in my head. And I leap out of bed and I go into the kitchen and I make my tea. I have my tea and I'm off to do work.
Wow, that's really impressive. So, when are you the most inspired?
Around 7 a.m. after I've cleaned up and done all my morning stuff. I usually come out and I walk around down to the horses and I walk over to the bush and I walk down to the lake. I just walk all around our homestead, and it makes me think, and it brings on these images that are really important to me. So yeah, I think that's the time I'm most inspired, around 7 in the morning.
Oh, your homestead sounds so lovely. Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. Well, one day I will see it. So now let's shift to food, sweet or savory?
I think sweet.
I think so too. What makes you smile the most?
Watching my grandchildren, especially watching them dance at the powwow. I love watching my grandkids dance.
Oh God, yes. Well, and you've got in your family the world's greatest hoop dancers, so, and probably jingle dress too, so I can understand that. So, what's the one thing most people don't know about you?
That all my grandchildren think I'm a mermaid.
What? Why do they think
Yeah.
you're a mermaid?
Well, it happened about 10 years ago with one of my granddaughters. We went to get mani-pedis, and she said, "Lita, why do you always wear blue nail polish on your toes?" And I said, "Oh, I just love it. I love the way it looks." She goes, "Do you know that mermaids have to wear that polish to be able to keep their legs from turning into fins?" And I said, "Really?" She goes, Lita, are you a mermaid? And I said, "I don't think so. I've never turned into fins or into a fish." She said, "I think you're a mermaid." And ever since that happened, I've always used blue nail polish, and all my grandkids think I'm a mermaid.
That is so beautiful. I stopped the clock, by the way, while you explained that, so the time didn't count against you. And your grandchildren call you Lita?
Oh, yes, they call me Lita.
And that is grandmother in what, Cree or Taino?
No, in Spanish.
Oh.
What happened is my oldest granddaughter couldn't say abuelita.
Oh, it's from
And so she
Abuelita.
cut it.
Okay. To Lita.
Yeah, she cut it to Lita. And then it just caught. And now even adults and everybody calls me Lita. Hardly anybody calls me Rosa anymore.
So funny. From Abuelita to Lita. I think it's really lovely. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to start the clock again now. All right, my question. Heels, flats, sneakers, or moccasins?
Heels or moccasins? Oh no. I like them both. Does it have one?
Yeah, you got
I
to
don't
choose.
know. They're pretty.
Heels, flats, sneakers, or mocks?
I like my heels and I like my mocks. So I don't know if I could break through either one of them. Yeah, it'd have to be a mix of both.
Oh my goodness. I've never seen moccasins with a heel, but I know I'd wear my moccasins. They're Navajo and they are so comfortable. I can't begin to tell you. I've worn those things to death. Okay, so what's inspiring you in life right now?
Right now, I see the future of my grandchildren, and it's a future that I don't see with everything that I had been hoping for them. So I need to make this world better. And it's up to me. I am the matriarch of my family, and it's up to me. And so I'm going to work really, really hard to make this world a better place for my grandkids.
Oh, that is so beautiful. You know, whether you're abuelita, whether you're a go-go, whether you're tutu, grandmothers are very special, and we play a very special role in the lives of our grandchildren, probably even more than our children. So thank you for that. We all are trying to change the world, and boy, you are doing it, girl. How would you define yourself in 3 words?
Loving, honest, and trustworthy.
Beautiful. What's something you notice about someone when you first meet them?
They usually smile.
What's the one talent you wish you had?
I wish I could fly a plane or a helicopter.
What's your favorite color?
Red, blue, and purple.
Well, of the 3, what's your favorite?
Pink?
That wasn't even one of the 3.
What can I say?
Nothing. All right, let me ask you this. What color of clothing do you wear most?
Red, and I wear a lot of blue.
Okay. What's the cutest thing on planet Earth?
Any one of my grandkids.
What's the best thing that's happened to you this year?
My husband and I had our 40th anniversary. We realized, wow, I still really, really like you.
Rosa John, Lita, Abuelita, Gogo, Tutu, famous woman that you are. What is your favorite song?
Machi by Yulali.
Machi by Ulali. We're going to listen to it as we go out. And I want to thank you, Rosa John, remarkable woman that you are, for being with me today on Womanocity, for Women with Curiosity on Woman Radio. It's women like you that we learn from with wisdom and beauty and creativity, who are all trying to make the world a better place for our babies, for our friends' babies, for our children's children, for everyone walking this beautiful planet that we call Mother Earth. I thank you so much. There's just not enough words.
In Taino, you say han han katu.
So hi and hun katu to you, Rosa John in Alberta, Canada. From me, Tadia Rice in Hawaii, to all the listeners around the world. Thank you so much for being with me today.
And thank you so much for having me. This has been so fun. I've had so much fun. And it's so awesome to be able to share who we are with the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, my darling. Okay, folks, I'm sorry it's time to sign off. But I will be with you again next Saturday, 9 p.m. South Africa time. For those not in South Africa, check your time zones. And I will have with you another remarkable, magnificent, exceptional woman to learn from, as I always do, because I'm one lucky duck. I meet and know so many remarkable women like you who are curious. So you'll hear from me next week from Woman Radio, broadcasting globally 24/7.
Iwe mei